I have always wondered what it's like for the makers out there who have multiple whips, 5+ whips, 17 whips, 20 whips, and beyond. First of all, how do you have that many knitting needles to keep all of those projects going? But also, is it chaotic and stressful, or do you thrive in that chaos? I always wanted to know. And more recently, I felt more and more curious about what it's like to have multiple works in progress. I used to be a devout monogamous maker. I would only ever work on one project at a time. And that was more so during the pandemic lockdowns. But once I returned to office, I realized I cannot bring an almost completed sweater with me to work every day. So that's when I instated the 2 to 3 whip system that I have going today, where I have a main work in progress, usually something larger scale or more intricate that I work on at home in the evenings and weekends. And then I have a commute project, a portable travel project, usually a sock or a hat or a mitten that I will bring with me to and fro when I go to the office and when I'm just out about in general. And I want something small enough that can fit in my purse and keep me occupied if I have downtime while I'm out. The issue I seem to have is when it comes to that in between period where I've finished and blocked a sweater, for example, and I'm gearing up to start my next large project, usually another sweater. I do plan out my projects. I'm looking at my Ravelry queue right now, and at any given point, the next 3 to 5 patterns on my Ravelry queue are pretty much what I intend to cast on. There's something in me that is just wanting something else. That's just like, what if I see what else is out there? What if I don't want to cast on whatever sweater it is I've designated for myself? What if I want to use that stash on, and what if I want to buy something new? There's always this what if. And so there's this period of decision paralysis that I always have where I just, what if I'm not making the right choice? What if this isn't the right project to cast on next? And I don't know why I overthink it so much. I don't know why I'm like that. I don't know why I overthink it so much, but I do inevitably. And it just always sucks because there's always going to be an opportunity cost, especially with knitting, where you're putting so much time into your knits, time that could be spent putting into other projects or doing other things. There's always a trade-off when you commit to a knitting project. And I just don't like that feeling of potentially making the wrong choice with my cast-ons. So not only is there the decision paralysis that happens when I finish a large project and I'm gearing up for my next project, there's also the motions of swatching for and casting on whatever that next project is once I finally decide. And that is my least favorite part about starting a new project. I love that excitement about starting a new project, but the act of starting a new project, I don't find enjoyable at all. I don't like swatching. I do it. I understand the importance of it, but I don't enjoy it. Depending on the construction of the sweater, this isn't always the case, but most of the sweaters I make tend to be top down and seamless. And usually at the beginning stages of projects like that are where all of the complicated fiddly stuff happens. You are counting stitches, you are placing markers to do some sort of shaping. There could be short rows or increases or joining in the round or something. Something where it's like you don't just cast on a few stitches and go on your merry way. Usually the more complicated aspects of the pattern are at the beginning stages. So today I'd like to entertain my curiosity and give in to the chaotic cast on energy and see what happens. My hope in doing this is that I not necessarily eliminate, but I improve that decision paralysis that I experience after finishing a large project. My thought is that if I can swatch for and potentially cast on for my next 2 to 3 projects, that means get them going, get them to a good spot, potentially knock out the fiddly bits like short rows and shaping and counting and all of those things, and then set it aside for me to come back to when I finish my current project. So that when I do finish my current project, I have something already going, ready to pick up instead of going through those icky steps of starting a new project right after finishing a project. That's the thing. The beginning and the end of every knitting project tends to be the ickiest, in my opinion. You have cast-ons and joining in the round and swatching and counting. You have bind-offs and weaving ends and blocking and seaming. Those are pretty much all of my least favorite things about any knitting project, and they all seem to be clustered together when I'm finishing a project and starting a new one. And this way, I'm getting the icky bits at the beginning of these cast-ons sorted out of the way so that when I do the icky bits of finishing my current project, I can jump right into the next project because I've already started it. Does that make sense? I'm going to set up my next few works in progress so that they are waiting for me. My plan isn't to truly become like a multi-whip person in the sense that I'm going to be actively working on all of these projects over time. I don't want to do that. I think that's when it would get chaotic and stressful for me to have multiple active whips going at a time. But if I have something cast on and waiting for me, I think that would be better. So the first project I am swatching for and potentially casting on today is the Tonight Top by Lily Kate France. I've mentioned this pattern a number of times on my channel, and I really have wanted to make it again. I've made it once, and it's a pattern that I've wanted to go back to ever since knitting it. I have 5 skeins of Majogarn Fine Merino earmarked for this project. I have done one swatch with this yarn already with 3mm needles, and that gave me a gauge of 28.5 stitches per 4 inches. And the gauge for the Tonight Top is 26 stitches per 4 inches. So I'm going to go up to a 3.25mm needle and see what kind of gauge that gets me. And then I also want to swatch for and potentially cast on the Beatrice cardigan by Julie Weisenberger. I want to use some Iztek Let Lopi that I got from Iceland when I went last year. I started the Author Cardigan by Jared Flood with this yarn, which is a worsted weight pattern, but this yarn is truly an Aran weight. And although I met gauge for that pattern, I got a pretty dense fabric, and I've decided to rip it out and go a different route with that yarn. So I'm going to swatch for the Beatrice cardigan with my Let Lopi yarn. Then I have the Northwoods V-neck by Jessie Made Designs. This is a DK weight pattern, but I am going to be knitting it up with worsted weight yarn because the gauge is 18 stitches and 28 rows per 4 inches, which is usually in line with what I get with a worsted weight yarn. In my experience, Jessie Mae tends to have a pretty loose gauge for her patterns. So I think the worsted weight would be perfect for this project. I'm going to be using a cone of Brooklyn Tweed Imbue worsted in the color Boro, which is a really nice navy blue color. I don't actually intend to cast this project on because it is going to be a knit along with my mom for her birthday in June. So I would like to cast on with my mom instead of casting on today, but it'll be nice to swatch already and have the swatching out of the way so that when it is time for me to cast on, I can just jump right in without having to gauge swatch. I'd also like to swatch for and potentially cast on for the Tony cardigan, also by Julie Weisenberger. For this, I'm using another cone of Brooklyn Tweed Imbue worsted in the color Santal. Yeah, I'm really excited for each of these projects. I think realistically, the Tonight Top will be my next main focus after I finish my current whip. But the rest, I'm not quite sure in what order I'll make them, but at least I will have swatched and I'll be in a position to cast on as soon as possible.